What triggers your submechanophobia? Is it swimming next to an actual animatronic, or just watching a submerged animatronic move? Is it the size and closeness? Or watching an abandoned animatronic deteriorate? This fear is probably different for each and every one of us, but whatever the reason, most of us here today have a love-hate relationship with this phobia. So, we bring you Submechanophobia Animatronics. Number 6. Eftling Monstro. We have been pretty vocal lately about our love for the Eftling recently here on Fastpass Facts, and one of the things that we love most about that park is that they take a lot of risks in their attractions, and don't mind being more on the scary side of things. In our Eftling video, which you should definitely go check out, we talked about how it went from a simple nature park into the fantastic theme park it is today. And the thing that began this whole evolution was the famous fairy tale forest. The fairy tale forest was a huge success. Nowadays, you can find 30 different fairy tale depictions from famous fairy tale writers, such as the Brothers Grimm and Hans Christian Andersen, as well as more unknown stories and even original fairy tales created by the Eftling. One of these fairy tales is Pinocchio. The Pinocchio fairy tale opened on March 24th, 2016, and it has 3 different scenes. The first scene is Geppetto's workshop. Through the windows, you can see the interior of the workshop, where dozens of mice, squirrels, and birds play on and with Geppetto's toys and other carvings. In the next scene near the workshop, we find some barrels where the fox and the cat, or Honest John and Gideon, are hiding, waiting for their next victim. And then there's the harbor, and in the harbor you will find nightmare fuel. Inside a pond, you can find the huge orange-red fish that swallowed Geppetto and Pinocchio. The animal appears to be a cross between a warty whale and a deep-sea angler, with luminous tentacles and a mouthful of dangerous teeth. Around the beast, there is a cloud of fishy air, and from time to time, the beast spouts an intense burst of water from its blowhole. This huge animal is half submerged, and it even has an interactive feature. There is a rod with a feather that visitors can use to tickle the monster awake. Whenever someone turns the reel of the rod, the animal wakes up, opening its eyes and mouth. At the back of its throat, we see Pinocchio, together with his father, Geppetto. Geppetto is standing behind a table with a lit candle, and Pinocchio looks startled, his arms raised in the air. The fish's mouth closes and opens again a little later. This time, Pinocchio is much more visible in the front of the mouth. Geppetto is still behind the table. Pinocchio tries to get out of the fish and calls for help. The water bubbles around this huge fish while we can hear it growling, so you can definitely imagine how amazing and creepy this is at the same time. Not only is this beast pretty big, but we can also get very close to it, and the whole Pinocchio asking for help while inside the fish thing doesn't help it to be less terrifying. Still, this is not very far up on the list, because the fish's design is not that creepy while compared to the other ones we'll be talking about, and also the animatronic is in perfect condition. Number 5. Lucy Loch Ness. The year was 2005, and more than 600 tourists were shocked to be watching for the first time the Loch Ness Monster, emerging from the loch's surface. Could it be that they were experiencing the first real evidence of this mythical monster's existence? Sadly for them, no. So what was it? Well, as part of a television stunt and the Loch Ness Monster: The Ultimate Experiment documentary, Channel 5 spent over £100,000 to create a 440-pound plesiosaur animatronic named Lucy. This animatronic was designed so it could swim in the dark waters of the Loch Ness and surprise tourists in order to get their reactions on tape. Lucy was made by animatronic experts from the Crawley Creatures Special Effects Company, whose owner, Jez Harris, helped create the model of Jabba the Hutt in the Star Wars film Return of the Jedi. Lucy was made from fiberglass and polyurethane rubber. She took 14 weeks to build and had to be aided in the water by divers, a job none of us would want to have. Just imagine having to swim in the dark waters of the lake, helping this huge and heavy animatronic move. This terrifying but very impressive animatronic was fitted with air mechanisms to allow different movements of her head, neck, and jaw. Lucy appeared in the water near a campsite, at the ruins of picturesque Urquhart Castle, and in front of the Royal Scot cruise ship, which runs tours of the loch. The documentary was recorded for 2 weeks, and many of the tourists who were able to experience it really believed that what they had seen was the real Loch Ness Monster, and they continued doing so until a week before the documentary came out, when Channel 5 broke the silence and revealed the truth about the animatronic. The only footage that we could find of this animatronic was in the Crawly Creatures demo reel, because the documentary is impossible to find. So if anyone happens to know where we can watch it, let us know in the comments. The animatronic can currently be found in perfect condition at the Oxford University Museum of Natural History. This animatronic fits perfectly on the list because it is terrifying, it is enormous, and it moved underwater. And the creepiest thing is that it could be found in a natural environment. However, we placed it in number 5, because it was only used for a short time. Not only that, but it was also never abandoned or even deteriorated, and it is no longer submerged. Seeing it in the museum is undoubtedly very imposing, but it doesn't give us the submechanophobia chills that it caused when seeing it submerged in the dark waters. Number 4. Billabong Bunyip. The city of Coffs Harbour, Australia is known all around the world for having the largest banana in Australia. This banana was built in 1964 as an attraction around a banana plantation. Over time, the park began evolving and adding new attractions, like water slides, an ice skating rink, and more. One of the most beloved attractions was the Baldwin Express monorail. This attraction took guests through several scenes where they were taught about the history of agriculture, kind of what we see at Epcot in the land. In one of the scenes of the attraction, the monorail passed by a billabong, and without notice, a terrifying creature could be seen swimming by. This creature emerged and stuck its head out of the water. It was a bunyip. For those of you who are not familiar with the term, a bunyip is a large mythical creature from Australian mythology, said to lurk in swamps, billabongs, creeks, riverbeds, and waterholes. The bunyip had at least 3 different mechanisms that gave the illusion that this monster was pretty big. Sadly, the attraction closed in 2005, mostly because the operating costs were very high, and the park couldn't afford to keep it in the best condition. So, what happened to the bunyip? Well, no one knows for sure, but the most heard rumor is that it was abandoned and eventually sank into the billabong, which makes it even more terrifying. People have been asking about it for a while, but the answers have been very ambiguous, which is what makes us think that it was probably abandoned. In 2015, on the official Big Banana Park Facebook page, a survey appeared in which they asked if people wanted to see the bunyip come back. So that gives people all over the hope that it may be restored and returned to the park one day. This terrifying creature is number 4 on our list, since it was nightmare fuel for many people. Seeing such a creepy animatronic swimming and then emerging from the dark waters was such a scary experience. And thinking about it being abandoned now and lying at the bottom of the billabong makes it even worse. Number 3. The Crocodile, Lake Placid. Last time we talked about this animatronic, we made the mistake of saying that Lake Placid is not a good movie. We heard you loud and clear, and we won't be mentioning that again. What we will be mentioning again, of course, is the amazing and terrifying animatronic that was created for this movie. This animatronic was also created by the super famous and talented team at Stan Winston Studios, solely for the purpose of using it for this movie. The biggest challenge with this animatronic is what brings all of you here today. The animatronic had to be submerged in the water all the time. But being as talented as the team in the studio is, they made it work, and created a full-sized animatronic puppet, complete with moving head and tail and snapping jaws, that would function underwater. The stuff of nightmares. To give you an idea of how big and terrifying this thing was, the largest crocodile in captivity back in 2013 measured a little more than 20 feet. The Lake Placid crocodile was over twice as long as that. To create it, the team first made a small-scale model that would serve as a guideline for the full-size build. The crocodile was mechanized through hydraulics, which, as had been learned on previous projects, worked fairly well in a water environment, as long as they were protected in waterproof housings and surrounded by a water-resistant skin. Now, before finishing the animatronic and doing a whole paint job, the crew took it to Castaic Lake in Los Angeles National Forest to test it. Imagine running into that thing when they were testing it. The team dropped it in the lake to confirm that the animatronic worked well underwater and swam as they needed it. And of course, it moved perfectly, and even propelled itself. As soon as they knew this nightmare fuel worked, they took it back to the studio, finished adding lots of paint details and texture, so the animatronic would look as real as humanly possible. They fixed some small problems, and the crocodile was ready to go. While they were filming, the crew attached the crocodile to a boat using a wire, so it could gain greater speed, and the animatronic was a success. It must have been terrifying for the actors to be swimming in the lake, being chased and attacked by this thing. A huge animatronic crocodile swimming in a real lake attacking us? No thank you. This is ranked in number 3 because while this crocodile is the stuff of nightmares, it was only used for these movies, and we will never get to experience the fear firsthand. It was also never abandoned or deteriorated, but if you see it from certain angles, you could see some exposed mechanisms, which is an added creepy factor. We asked the experts from Stan Winston Studios what happened to the animatronic after they were done with it, and they said that sadly, it was eventually dismantled as it was just too large to store and no longer operational. But at least we can still see it in action. Number 2. Bruce, Jaws. It was so hard not to place Bruce as number 1, since he was the animatronic that completely changed the film and the special effects industry. Not only that, but it terrified a whole generation to such a degree that they could not even go into a pool without thinking about him. Spielberg was able to create a classic that people would never forget, but the film almost cost him his career. In the fall of 1973, director Joe Alves designed the shark for Jaws. 3 full-size, pneumatically powered units were constructed at the cost of $150,000 each. They were collectively named Bruce, after Steven Spielberg's lawyer. They each measured about 25 feet long and weighed hundreds of pounds. One shark, known as a sea sled, was a full-bodied prop with its stomach carved out. The other 2, known as platform sharks, were each one-sided. One platform shark moved from camera left to right, with the side facing away from the camera completely exposed. The other moved in the opposite direction. Once completed, the 3 sharks were trucked to Martha's Vineyard. The sharks were built by a legendary team overseen by mechanical effects supervisor Robert A. Matty, also known for creating other terrifying creatures, like the 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea squid. But despite the huge expertise of this team, the shark animatronics were a headache for the film's production. There are other reports that the sharks would sometimes slip off of the platform and get tangled in a bed of seaweed. At other times, the pneumatic hoses that controlled the shark's movement took on salt water. The foam used as the skin on the sharks became bloated, and parts even corroded. Not only that, but the shark also sank once it was placed in the sea, and divers had to go and fish it out. That must have been such an awful experience. But as incredible as this may seem, this helped the movie to be a greater success, since many of the scenes had to be changed so that they wouldn't have to use the shark so much, and this created greater suspense for the final scenes. Even Spielberg thinks that the movie would have made half the money had the shark worked. As we all know, the film went on to be a huge success, but at the time when the film was finished, and before it came out, Spielberg thought that his career was over. The studio was reluctant to make the movie because they had no confidence in it. So keeping sharks in good condition was not a priority, and they just dumped the sharks in the backlot, and they rotted away. Thankfully, the shark's molds were saved, and a 4th shark was created. This shark could be seen by guests visiting Universal Studios Hollywood from 1976 to 1990, until it was, again, abandoned in a junkyard. Fortunately, it was then saved and restored by the legendary Greg Nicotero, who later donated it to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences Museum. Bruce is so far up on this list because it is basically the father of submechanophobia causing animatronics. And seeing all the different Bruce animatronics with their exposed mechanisms in the ocean is a nightmare. Not only that, but the fact that they were abandoned makes it a very compelling reason for being number 2. Number 1. Bert, Bertha, and Baby Bunyip. If you want to talk about submechanophobia, it's impossible to do it without mentioning the Murray Bridge Bunyip. This animatronic has become an icon among this vast community. But what are the origins of this character, and why is it so terrifying? Well, its name is Bert, and it was created by Dennis Newell. The animatronic debuted in 1972 at Murray Bridge, Australia, and just like the Big Banana Park one, it is based on the Bunyip legends. When he first debuted, guests could pay 20 cents to make the Bunyip emerge from his cave. When it emerged, it made a sound so loud that it could be heard a whole kilometer away. The first incarnation of Bert was terrifying. and as time went by, it only got worse, due to the fact that it started wearing down because it was submerged. If this whole scene was not scary enough, in 1982, Bert was turned into Bertha and given a little baby Bunyip. That same year, someone vandalized the Bunyip soundbox so it would never stop roaring. They sadly also vandalized Bertha and her baby, and in 2000, they were removed. A more friendly and less noisy version of the Bunyip was brought back, but sadly, its baby was nowhere to be found. The Bunyip continues terrifying whoever dares visit it, but nothing compares to what guests could find back in October 2017. During this time, there was an oil leak in the Bunyip's cage, which turned this animatronic into its most terrifying version. It emerged from the water, completely dark and covered in oil. Thanks to this leak, most of the animatronic's mechanisms were damaged, and the smell was terrible. In 2019, the Bunyip was completely renovated, and the repairs were estimated to cost around 100,000 Australian dollars. With its return, the Bunyip show is now completely free, and the Murray Bridge Bunyip can be found lurking in its cave today on the banks of the Murray River at Sturt Reserve, Murray Bridge. Bert is definitely number one on our list because he is not only terrifying in each and every one of its incarnations, but he is also the symbol of submechanophobia everywhere. If you want to learn about science and how our world works, go and subscribe to However. Links in the description and in the comments.
Loch Ness Monster prop. We don't know about you, but it has always been a fantasy of ours to discover some long-lost treasure. Well, that's precisely what happened to a lucky crew operating an underwater robot in a famous Scotland lake, rumored to be the home of the mythical Loch Ness Monster. The crew stumbled upon a piece of forgotten movie history, the long-lost Loch Ness Monster prop used in the filming of the 1970 movie The Private Life of Sherlock Holmes, directed by Billy Wilder. Even though this is not an animatronic, we thought this 30-foot model that made film history deserved a spot on this list. This 9-meter-long model was just a giant head attached to a long neck. The two bumps that are usually associated with the Loch Ness Monster were noticeably absent because the director didn't like them. However, the humps had hidden buoyancy aids, and as a result, Nessie disappeared under the waves while being towed to its destination and was thought to be lost forever, till this crew found it again. This 4-ton model was discovered at a depth of 180 meters, with eyes bulging out of its head. The model is made to look as if it's angry, with giant teeth and flared nostrils. It honestly does look scary. The crew said that the prop was too heavy to drag to the surface, and maybe it's for the best, for the structure is nightmare-inducing.
Promotional installation for The Haunting of Bly Manor. You have probably heard of The Haunting of Bly Manor, right? The famous drama gothic romance on Netflix? Well, did you know about this promotional installation at the Bryant Park Fountain in New York City? That's right, folks. There was something in the water in Bryant Park, as the billboards near the fountain specified. Imagine just strolling casually near the fountain, when suddenly you come across a billboard announcing that there is something in the water. Now you are torn between wanting to go check it out and running the hell out of Dodge. Your curiosity wins out, and you slowly walk towards the fountain, only to see a ghost emerging out of the water. Spooky, right? That is exactly what the production team wanted. We must say, this is some brilliant advertising. The ghost looks as if it had been lurking around in the fountain, waiting for its perfect victim. Although we could not find any information about the specifics of the installation, with its jet black hair framing its face and the steam billowing all around it, it certainly makes for a terrifying sight.
Kappa Animatronics. Far away in the town of Fukusaki in Japan, okay, not that far away, there's a pond in the Fujikawayama Park. A pond with scary monsters just waiting to grab you and pull you under. If you stare into the murky pond long enough, you'll see the water begin to bubble. And suddenly there are 3 huge frog-like monsters appearing out of the water. This frog is known as Kappa and is a supernatural monster, one of the yokai. It dwells in the water, waiting and watching for the perfect moment to jump out and scare you. The town of Fukusaki was the birthplace of Kunio Yanagita, who's known as the father of Japanese folklore studies. To honor Yanagita, this town has been using realistic monsters, yokai, as their town mascots. This strategy has generated a buzz around this town and has apparently attracted 1.7 times more tourists and visitors to the town, developing the economy. Seems like no one can resist the lure of supernatural entities. There are 3 kappa, 1 big kappa and 2 little ones. The big kappa is called Gajiro. These animatronics were masterminded by Tomo Ogawa. These monsters are humanoid, with a beaked mouth and sporting reptilian skin. Their hair is coarse, and their hands are outstretched in the universal gesture of "I am about to get you." Combine this with their webbed fingers, open mouths, and their huge eyes, and it is truly a scary sight. The kappa have a special plate on their heads that gives them their power while they're on land, and must be filled with water at all times. The kappas surface only once every 30 minutes for a few seconds at a time. The kappas are cleaned by employees who take inflatable rafts to the middle of the pond. Can you imagine being that close to the scary monsters for long periods of time? This town is definitely worth a visit.
Jumanji Crocodile. If you have watched the original 1995 Jumanji film, then you already know that crocodiles are one of the biggest dangers in that movie. This animatronic crocodile was created by Amalgamated Dynamics Inc., which is an American special effects company. One of their specialties is animatronics, and they have become one of Hollywood's go-to studios for animatronics, thus bringing many creatures to life. The Jumanji crocodile has got to be one of their most famous works, a true accomplishment. This is one of the most realistic animatronics we have ever come across. At 750 pounds, this thing was a beast. It is 15 feet long, and you will never believe this, but it can swim. We are pretty sure that if we ever came across this animatronic in a lake, we would run for our life. Better not to take any chances, right? The best feature, though, of this animatronic is that it was made to ride. There is, in fact, a lot of footage of people doing just that. A mini scary ride. Apart from that, this animatronic crocodile has eyes that move. It has a body that was made to mimic actual crocodiles. This is one scary croc. It probably won't eat you, although we make no promises.
Monster Mansion. Next up, we have a submechanophobia-inducing ride, the Monster Mansion at Six Flags over Georgia. This attraction takes you on a boat ride through a flooded mansion. The story behind it goes like this. Humans have been invited to a monster picnic. All along the ride, you encounter monster animatronics of various shapes and sizes. There's even a huge banner welcoming humans. But the monsters are anything but. The humans are given a warning in the beginning to stay off the marsh. But of course, that does not end up happening. For where's the fun in that? The boat purposefully veers off course into dark and swampy waters, where the monsters are especially unfriendly to humans. The animatronics have scary-looking faces, and some of them keep moving their heads back and forth in an eerie way. The state-of-the-art lighting, as well as the monster sounds, are enough to send a chill down your spine. As a special treat, you'll also get to hear the screams of your fellow passengers. The humans eventually make it out safely, but they are unlikely to ever forget this experience.
Anaconda. Next up, we have yet another animatronic from a famous film, the giant snake from Anaconda. Whether you remember the plot and the characters or not, you are sure to remember the giant snake. At 40 feet, this snake animatronic developed by Walter Conti and his Edge Innovations team is a technical marvel. This movie was inspired by recent discoveries of snakes that were up to 35 feet long, capable of swallowing entire humans. But of course, unlike animals like dogs or cats, the crew could not use a real snake unless they wanted to be snake food. So they decided to use an animatronic instead. But creating a snake animatronic, especially such a huge one, was no easy feat. They had to replicate the curved gliding movement of the snake to make it look natural. A large number of individually controlled joints had to be manufactured and linked together in a very slender and sleek form. Not only that, but the joints also had to be controlled together so that it would look like the snake was moving on its own in the film. In the end, it took 60 dual-axis hydraulically powered joints with a total of 120 degrees of freedom, or DOF, to achieve this. Apart from having so many joints, one of the greatest accomplishments of this animatronic is that all of these joints are linked to one another for synchronous movement, so each joint is affected by all the joints upstream. Since the movie would be shot underwater, all elements that went into making the animatronic had to be waterproof. However, during filming, the controls of the animatronic suddenly shorted out, and the movie star Jennifer Lopez was in the line of fire when this happened. She was almost struck by more than 1 ton of metals and wires, which could have ended up electrocuting her. Fortunately, nothing of the sort happened. The only result was some erratic movements of the snake, which they even included in the movie to make it more realistic. The snake is one of the most complex serially linked robots to exist in the world. The eyes, tongue, and lips of the snake were all made to move independently. The snake's outer skin was made of rubber and looked pretty real. It was truly a marvelous feat of engineering, and it was developed by a team of 80 people in only 7 months.
Zhenggu Animatronics. In China, there's a company known as Zhenggu Tech that specializes in making very scary life-size animatronics of animals, marine life, insects, and even ancient creatures such as dinosaurs and mythical creatures like dragons. Many of their animatronics have found a home in SeaWorld on the Gold Coast of Australia. They have a wide array of animatronics known as creatures of the deep. But unlike what you would expect from such a name, these creatures are not underwater. But they do indeed provoke submechanophobia and megalophobia owing to their sheer size alone. Creatures of the Deep features many marine animals, including ancient ones such as aquatic dinosaurs, as well as mythical creatures such as the Kraken. Some other attractions include the Loch Ness Monster, sharks, and other Jurassic animals. SeaWorld opened this exhibition to the public in 2016. There are over 30 animal exhibits, and you can enjoy them both indoors and outdoors. There's a pathway for tourists to stroll through with the exhibits on either side. These exhibits are made of soft silicone, and to add an extra touch of realism to them, they're made to move their limbs and head, rotate their eyes, sway their tails, and blink. The animatronics are even made to look like they are breathing. Combine this with the sounds they make, and you can almost believe they're real. Their sizes vary from 0.5 meters to an incredible 30 meters in height.
Shark Night. We have yet another masterpiece by Walt Conti and his Edge Innovations, the shark animatronics from Shark Night 3D. While most of the sharks used in the movie were the result of visual effects, the director wanted animatronic sharks for the major attack sequences. The sharks in question were a hammerhead shark and a great white. Like every other animatronic they have created, Walt Conti and his team blew this one out of the park too. In fact, he called these animatronics a marriage of art and technology, and we must say, we agree. Conti made 2 different versions of each shark, a swimmer and an attacker. The former was used to film scenes where the sharks are silently lurking, while the latter was used for the scenes that require intense bursts of power from the sharks. Both of these versions required very different internal mechanisms and different horsepowers. The sharks were 10 to 12 feet long. The swimmer weighed about 700 pounds, while the attacker was a whopping 1,100-pound beast. Conti says that they began work on the shark by taking inspiration from thousands of photos. Apparently, they started with a real set of jaws for each shark, so as to get the anatomy right. They also worked very closely with biologists, while making the molds out of clay and painting the skin, and building various body parts. They are certainly dedicated to their craft. Since the sharks had to be neutrally buoyant and look like real sharks, the team had to take care to use incredibly light materials like aluminum and titanium. The attack shark could not be naturally buoyant, so it was attached by a wire to a crane. Then it was mounted on rigs so that it could be launched forward at 30 miles per hour. The animatronics were truly a remarkable feat of engineering.
Sea monster I Corsari. Located in Gardaland, one of the most iconic theme parks in Italy is the Sea Monster of the I Corsari ride. It's a boat ride that takes place in the dark and is known as the Italian version of the Pirates of the Caribbean. The story goes like this. Guests embark on a journey underground where they're chased by the ghosts of the Corsairs. They come across dueling pirates and sunken shipwrecks along this journey, complete with the occasional sea monster. Although this ride has many scary animatronics of supernatural creatures, the main attraction is the sea monster of the pirate ghost. Amidst flashing red and green lights, he rises out of the water. You first see a serpent-like tail, which then ascends to reveal his humanoid face attached to a very long neck. His eyes flash terrifyingly, creating a terrifying sight. The sea monster can move his face and his jaw up and down, much like he would if he were to grab you and eat you. Not only that, his eyeballs are completely white without any pupils, adding to the scary sight. This ride took as many as 30 partners to be completed and was opened to the public way back in 1992. Recently, in 2018, the ride underwent some renovations, including a 3D video mapping technology and an entirely new and much scarier soundtrack. Don't miss this one, folks. You will probably have nightmares after the ride, but it will totally be worth it.
Moby Dick. In Wakefield, Massachusetts, there's an amusement park called the Pleasure Island, also known as the Disneyland of the Northeast. But don't let the name fool you. This park had an attraction called the Moby Dick Hunt, modeled after the whale that brought about the end of Captain Ahab, which is said to be one of the scariest underwater animatronics ever. In this attraction, guests had to take a boat ride to hunt the whale. Guests would embark on a 30-foot-long whaling boat and take a ride around a human-made lagoon in search of the great white whale. During the ride, they would come across several obstacles such as rhinoceroses, cannibals, and even some plastic dolphins that jumped out of the water. After escaping the cannibals, guests would watch the whale rise out of the water, as if on cue. This ride was the mastermind of Marco Engineering, created 3 years after the Gregory Peck version of the Moby Dick movie had been released in 1956. At 70 feet long, the whale was massive and weighed around 3 tons. This was quite a feat to be achieved in the 1950s if you think about it. As if the sheer size of it was not intimidating enough, it would bare its teeth after rising out of the water. It also had water spewing out of its head. Unfortunately, a whale this size, when technology had not advanced as much, meant a lot of maintenance issues. The park closed down after a decade of being in business. The land is now occupied by Edgewater Office Park. The pond in which the great white whale resided is still part of the property. As for the whale, well, we cannot tell you for sure, but the rumor has it that Moby Dick still remains in the pond, waiting, watching. Special thanks to However for being part of this video. Go and subscribe to However. Links in the description and in the comments.
You can't get enough of Submechanophobia, and we decided to find the scariest and rarest Submechanophobia animatronics out there. And today we'll be joined by Theme Park Crazy to talk about them. This time, you ranked these animatronics to see which one is the rarest and scariest of all. So let's dive in.
Number 8. Animatronic Whales, Star Trek IV. Star Trek IV: The Voyage Home was a political film imbued with environmental activism masquerading as a fish-out-of-water comedy. Some people actually say that this film played a huge part in why humpback whales are not extinct nowadays. Leonard Nimoy, who directed the film, approached Industrial Light and Magic to create the special effects and the whales. Only 5% of the whale footage from the movie are of real whales. The rest are purely animatronics and special effects. There were 2 different kinds of animatronics and props created for the film. The first kind was created by Clay Pinney. These pieces were life-sized mechanical mock-ups of the whales like the heads, tails, or fins. These animatronics were only used for a few shots. These scenes were pretty challenging to shoot for the team because they had to shoot at a small tank at Paramount that only had about 54 inches of water. The other kind of animatronics were created by Walter Conti. Conti, along with Industrial Light and Magic, made 2 animatronic miniatures that were about 5 feet long. These whales were fitted with the mechanics and radio equipment required for control and operation. To prevent water from ruining the whale's electronics, the model maker sealed every individual mechanical component rather than attempting to waterproof the entire whale. The finished models were put in the swimming pool of Sarah High School in San Mateo, California, for 2 weeks of shooting. The operation of the whales required 4 handlers and divers with video cameras to help set up the shots. These animatronics are very impressive, but for anyone who has submechanophobia, they can be pretty terrifying.
Number 7. Fish Boy, Willow. Willow by Ron Howard is a film full of fantastic creatures and special effects. All of these created again by the talented Industrial Light and Magic. The company used an endless number of techniques to create the magic we see in every scene, and one of these techniques was the use of animatronics. For the film, Ron Howard requested a monstrous aquatic animatronic for a scene titled Fish Boy. In this scene, Willow's boat was going to be attacked by a giant fish. A big tank full of fans was made to simulate a storm and waves to create the scene. The animatronic was installed, and everything seemed to be going according to plan, with every part of the scene perfectly coordinated to be filmed. But the production suffered from the same problems that the production team had with Bruce in Jaws. The animatronic fish had so many problems, but the worst of all was that they failed to make the animatronic look real. So in the end, this scene was removed entirely from the film, which was such a shame and a huge disappointment for Howard.
To this day, as I talk about it, I feel a little pang because a part of me really loved Fish Boy.
The animatronic is obviously a thing of nightmares, and it does meet all the criteria to be on this list. We see it completely submerged, semi-submerged, and the worst of all, we see its mechanisms exposed. And even if Fish Boy was cut from the movie, we can say that it will live forever in our nightmares.
Number 6. Water Dragon at Toei Kyoto Studio Park. We know that Toei does not need an introduction, but in the slight case you may not know, they are the studio that created anime such as Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, One Piece, and others. And as if that weren't enough, Toei has its own theme park that also works as a film set called Kyoto Studio Park. This park is entirely modeled after the Edo period. Every detail of this park is interesting and perfectly designed to be historically correct, except for one little creepy detail. In a small pond inside this park, there is something lurking in the water. This mysterious creature is a water dragon. This aquatic animatronic emerges from the depths, blowing smoke through its nostrils. This dragon's design is pretty disturbing, and one of the main reasons why is that its eyes look totally lifeless. Also, it does not help at all how green and murky the pond's water looks. Instead, it adds a lot to the fear factor. So while this animatronic may not have the scariest look, it certainly meets several of the requirements it needs to be on this list.
Number 5. Realistic Deep Sea Monster. This might be the least sophisticated animatronic on this list, but that doesn't mean that it doesn't terrify people with submechanophobia, so much so that when we asked the Duck Squad about it, you had many things to say. But what everyone wonders is, where is this strange animatronic from? Why was it created? This animatronic was created by Canosaur, a company in China that specializes in creating prehistoric and fantasy creatures animatronics. This sea monster animatronic was created for a private show. Its design is pretty simple. It works with a series of cylinders and a hydraulic system to raise and lower the animatronic from the water, which terrifies anyone, honestly. And it does not use any electric motors, only pneumatic devices. Now, one of the most disturbing parts of the design of this animatronic is probably the fact that it has holes in its neck and mouth, which means that while the animatronic is submerged, it is full of water. So, thanks for pointing that out. We'll be thinking about it for a while. We agree that it is very unpleasant to see how the water comes out of these holes after the creature emerges from the water. The company's page is currently inactive, so that probably means that Canosaur is probably extinct. But they created a legacy that will live in every submechanophobe's nightmares.
Number 4. Fluffy Shark Wipeout Australia. The Wipeout was a Vekoma Waikiki Wave Superflip at Dreamworld on the Gold Coast, Queensland, Australia. The ride was the world's first Vekoma Waikiki Wave Superflip, a ride similar to the traditional topspin. This is to say that the ride is like you're being put into a blender. The ride goes in every way possible, swinging passengers around. This is in itself already pretty scary, but look at what's lurking beneath. A life-size shark animatronic is circling below guests as if it were waiting for a guest to fall off the ride and into the lagoon so it could have a delicious snack. This shark was nicknamed Fluffy. Fluffy's design is pretty fantastic, and while the way the shark moves across the water seems pretty realistic and equally scary, the fact that it doesn't have any eye or jaw movements does break the illusion a little bit. Still, this animatronic looks pretty imposing, especially when you consider that you would see it while riding this thing. Sadly, due to water restrictions and the deterioration of the ride, the original lagoon was drained. Of course, the shark was completely removed because it would not make sense to have it there without the lagoon. After this, the ride went through many changes, and effects were removed and brought back, until 2019 when the ride was permanently closed. You would think that the ride would be replaced with another ride or something better, but it was replaced by, drumroll please, shaded seating space for guests. Much better than a ride with a shark animatronic, right? No. And while this animatronic could be terrifying for people with submechanophobia, we have to admit that it would have been cool to experience a ride where an animatronic shark is swimming below you, waiting to eat you up.
Number 3. Drowning Cow Animatronic, Temple Grandin. This is, in our opinion, the scariest animatronic that we have ever covered in our Submechanophobia videos. From the moment we first laid eyes on this footage, we knew that people would be petrified watching it. There are many comments in which people wonder where this animatronic came from and why it was created. Well, here's the answer. This cow was made for the HBO original movie, Temple Grandin. This biopic tells the story of Mary Temple Grandin, an American scientist and animal behaviorist, and her innovations that revolutionized practices for the humane handling of livestock on cattle ranches and slaughterhouses. In one of the film's most disturbing scenes, we can see a poor cow drowning due to an inefficient way to clean parasites off the cattle. And that's where this animatronic came from. Because there wasn't a lot of budget to power the animatronic with hydraulics or pneumatics, Bob Trevino, the creator of this animatronic, designed it to operate with a purely cable control system. And it even had bubbles coming out of her nose, so it would look more realistic. Honestly, the animatronic looks so good, which makes it very scary, as it is completely submerged, and the fact that it simulates a poor animal drowning makes it much worse. Here we can see the animatronic in its early stages. This animatronic is terrifying, which means that the creators did a fantastic job. It will remain in our nightmares for a long time.
Number 2. Lake Monster Backlot River Tour at MGM Grand. Back in the late 80s and early 90s, movie studio theme parks were all the rage, and in 1993, MGM Grand Adventures theme park opened adjacent to the MGM Grand Hotel and Casino in Las Vegas. The idea behind this park was to have a family-themed area so that more families with small children could visit the hotel without worrying about what to do with their kids. When it opened, the park had 11 original rides in 7 themed areas. But one of the most talked about attractions of this park was the Backlot River Tour. This attraction has been described as a mix between Jungle Cruise at Disney parks and Universal Studios' Hollywood Studio Tour. In this attraction, guests embarked on a tour via a large boat that passed mock-ups of movie sets with special effects such as gunfire, rain, and water cannons. In addition, the attraction had several animatronics, which could be considered kind of creepy. But the creepiest part of all the attraction was the beginning, where a terrifying lake monster literally popped out of the water. This animatronic was completely submerged and surprised and scared guests by jumping out of the water, growling for a bit, and then creepily going back into the water again. The animatronic is definitely not very advanced, and its movements are not very fluid, but that makes it creepier than intended. But the most terrifying thing about this animatronic is seeing how the creature goes back into the water. Those slow, awkward movements are definitely the thing of nightmares. The park was not a huge success, and in 2002, it was renamed the Park at MGM Grand. It served as a rental facility for corporate functions before being closed permanently in 2002. Since 2006, the property has been occupied by the Signature at MGM Grand. No one knows what happened to the animatronic, but it was probably destroyed.
Number 1. Catfish. Beneath is a 2013 horror film that tells the story of a group of teenagers that are celebrating the end of high school with a canoe trip.
Bad idea.
But are attacked by a giant man-eating catfish. And while this might not be the best horror film, or even a good one, we can say that it is pretty cool that they used practical effects instead of only relying on the use of CGI. The use of practical effects is excellent in any movie, but it is even better in horror movies because nothing can see the idea of realism of a creature than having it physically on set. This animatronic was created at the insistence of director Larry Fessenden. Using an animatronic to give life to the catfish provides the creature with that retro and nostalgic feel. This monster was created by Justin Raleigh and his Fractured FX team. This fish is a classic combination of puppetry and animatronics in the vein of Bruce, the shark from Jaws. But unlike our favorite shark, the catfish is shown from the beginning of the movie and subsequently in countless scenes. Some people say that the animatronic, while very impressive, is totally unconvincing as a source of danger. But even if this is true, it gives us countless submechanophobia-inducing scenes. On Reddit, this monster is known for terrorizing people who classify it as way too big, way too close. And how could it not be? Just watch this scene and judge for yourself. Special thanks to Theme Park Crazy for joining us today. Go check out his channel and subscribe. And if you want to start planning your next vacation to either Disney or Universal Studios, our friends at pixievacations.com can help you plan your perfect vacation to Disneyland, Disney World, a Disney cruise, or Universal Studios, specifically tailored to your vacation style and budget. And working with a Pixie is completely free. So talk with them to make the best out of your vacation.